right, so thank you all for coming out tonight for Dueling Shovels, the new chapbook by Sean Thomas Dougherty and Jeremy Schraffenberger, a collection of golden shovel poems that you're going to hear about tonight, inspired by the writing of James Hearst, whose former house we are in. So it's a really apt conclusion to this year's season. Also want to thank Dave Meyer, I see you came in here. Dave and Pat, they are they had underwritten the first, Sean's the inaugural visiting writer from a series that they've started that hopefully will now continue every year.
We're both former students of Jim.
And that's right. Yeah. So you have some real connections to all of them. So that's great.
Have classes in the basement.
Yeah, that's right. People still, that's still there. You can still see that, the fireplace and all of that. So yeah, so that's great. So anyways, I'm not going to try, because Jeremy actually gives the best introductions, and I'm not going to try to compete with that. So I'll just say some very quickly here. Both of these are two really accomplished poets, good friends. It was great to see them come together to figure out how to put together this book. They're going to tell you all about it, so I'm going to let them do that. So let's give it up for Sean Thomas Dougherty J.D. Schraffenberger.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everyone, for coming. This is really great. Sean and I have known each other for a couple of decades now, and we've never collaborated, though, creatively. I've had the pleasure of publishing some of his poems in the North American Review, and I like how we have all these confluences happening. Sean was also the winner a couple of years ago of James Hearst Poetry Prize. He's been here before, back in 2014. He gave a reading that, for my money, was the best reading I've ever attended. It was a magical moment. Not only that, 14 years later he comes back and Vince doTERRA remembers to bring the sweater that Sean left here.
You can't get more points than that.
So most of you know who James Hearst is, the Iowa farmer poet. He's known as an agricultural poet, but as Sean, it's really good to get a different point of view from someone elsewhere to read James Hearst's work, because he sees different things. I learned about James Hearst when I was in grad school in Binghamton, New York, and the James Hearst Poetry Prize, which, Vince, you launched in the year 2000, 2001. So that's how I learned who James Hearst was when I was in grad school. I arrived here and I knew his work somewhat. And it was a pleasure and kind of an honor to get to learn more about his work and teach his work, and really to get to know the place, get to know Cedar Falls, and get to know Iowa, not only through the places themselves, but through the poems. Sean, do you want to tell us what James Hearst meant to you, and then we'll share a couple poems?
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who grew up on the East Coast and in Ohio, when I was first came across the work of James Hearst was really when I came out here. And I saw he was called the farmer poet. I thought that was really an afterthought, because for me, Hearst is really a poet of labor and the human condition. And so much of his poems are about the interaction of people. And so he could have been, the farming was just, for me, the impetus to talk about things of the human heart. So that label, I think, is really reductive when we look at his poems. His poems are about much more. They're about, the sort of defining lyric sensibility of what it is to be a person and alive, and to feel grief and joy, and how those things play out in the dailiness of our lives.
And when Jim invited us to collaborate, that was basically all he said. Hey, I want to bring Sean to Cedar Falls again. Will you collaborate on something? We both said, sure, with no other instructions at all. I'm like, what do we do now? I mean, I like you, Sean, but what are we going to do?
Right.
We've batted things back and forth, and I'll credit Sean with coming up with the idea, let's do some golden shovels. We thought about a few different forms, but the golden shovel form, which I'll let you talk about a little bit more, is essentially about honoring another poet. It's about bringing their work into your own. So in some ways, their work is infused in your own. And so doing a golden shovel requires you to choose some other poetry, right? Some other lines of poems from someone else. So we chose James Hearst as the central figure of the source of our material. It's a new form, and it's an American form. So Sean, do you want to say what the form is, and then I'll demonstrate. I'll be the guinea pig.
It was invented by Terrence Hayes, originally to celebrate the work of Gwendolyn Brooks. And so what he did is he took Gwendolyn Brooks' poem, the first Golden Shovel he wrote, he took "We real cool," we skip school, we skip, we lurk late, we thin gin, we
Sing sins.
sin, we jazz June,
We die soon.
soon, yeah. And he put that poem on the left-hand side of his
Right-hand
poem,
side.
right-hand side,
Right-hand.
right-hand side. And then he wrote into it, creating a narrative. And so her poem is actually part of his poem. And so we did that with Hearst. We took lines and poems from his, and we did the exact same thing.
I'll read one. How's that?
Yeah.
I'll read first the line from James Hearst that I took. So I took a passage from James Hearst's poem, Sooner or Later, which is on page 406 of the complete, if you're following along, of the complete James Hearst poetry. This is a poem from 1980. And the passage goes like this. But my trouble seems so small, I laugh at it. To sleep knowing some mother, some child somewhere, die of theirs every day. I should also mention that a lot of these poems are about the death of my mother. So I promise you I'll break down at some point. So you'll get that treat. I'll try to get through it without doing so, but it doesn't always work. I held it together for my radio interview this morning.
There.
Just enough. Golden Shovel after James Hearst's Sooner or Later. Her shoulder wrenches back with each breath, machine-like but slowing down. The spaces between stretch longer and longer. My dad and brothers and I are waiting for my mother to die. The trouble with waiting for someone to die is that the waiting always seems heartless and cold. How could I eat a banana or say something so trivial while my mother is dying? Our voices are thin and small in the room. My brother is thinking of going to law school. I crack a stupid joke about lawyers, and we all gently laugh. Mom would have laughed loudest, even though it wasn't that funny. She always laughed, and it's hard to believe we'll never hear her do so again. Dad says he'll sleep at the hospice tonight. My brothers and I leave, knowing it might happen while we're gone, or tomorrow, or someday next week. Nobody can tell. What's the rush? Our mother will stop breathing sooner or later. In the morning, something shifts in the air like static, and I feel small as a child toddling down the long, slick hallway, looking for somewhere to hide from the world, somewhere to cry. I'll watch her die, and the kind nurses will arrange her body in a posture of tranquility. I say my goodbyes. My dad and brothers say theirs. My own children are miles away. Sooner or later is too soon, every time. Someday becomes today, then it becomes just another day.
It's funny because we wrote these separately. I wrote mine first, and then Jeremy followed. These sort of themes of grief and loss, or they interplay throughout the poems in ways about which seems so like we meant it.
Yeah, there's magic there.
Yeah. So this is called Golden Shovel after James Hearst. No news is good news.
Did we ask you to speak up?
Okay.
Both of you.
louder.
Yeah, louder. Can you page? Thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Golden Shovel after James Hearst. No news is good news. And here's Hearst, a piece from Hearst. Having read the same names in the paper, day after day. When I was a child, all I wanted was to disappear. Having no superpowers, I taught myself how to read and lived hidden among the monkey and the man, the strange green eggs and ham. Learned the same language I am writing to you. Learned without knowing the names of God, purple loosestrife, dandelion, acorn, alleyways in which I draw in chalk the great and ordinary goodness, the remains that remain. A sort of plow made of this paper that can be folded into fields. Words that fold the day into killdeer and the dark into crow feathers. And only long after, when I am wind, may it too open your chest like the unfolding day.
This is really becoming like dueling shovels now. It feels like one up each other. You don't know how intimidating it is to read with Sean because he's such a poet I admire so much. I'm going to read another poem that's basically the same scenario as before about my mother. I'll try to speak up, but if I don't, it's not for presentation purposes, it's for other purposes. This one is after James Hearst's poem, Mother. And I'll have to say about the golden shovel form, you choose the work that you choose the passage that you're going to be writing toward, right? And so obviously I've chosen some pieces that have the word mother in them. So there was some selection. It's not completely random the way, some forms when you're trying to be generative, it can be just almost random. And that's the point. It's not to think, but to just allow the form to get you where you need to go. In this case, I knew I was writing towards something dealing with a very specific moment in my life. Here's the passage that I quote from Mother. She bent like a tree in the wind, scarred by wounds of love and labor. Golden shovel after James Hearst's Mother. Before my mother died, she could not swallow. She slurred her words. For 2 years, she could not lie flat on her back, bent forward in a chair. Every vertebra was fractured, like 33 explosions, she said. At first, there'd be a twist, then a coil and merciless pop. Another branch snapped from the dying tree. How could she not know that she was dying? Even in her last hours, she managed to rouse herself from the cloak of medication to ask directly, am I dying? Only the wind outside answered, speaking the language of wildfire. Scarred throat, hot breath, brittle teeth, tongue too parched to speak by. In the dim-lit hospice room, we 4 boys gathered her wounds to us, tucked them into pockets, carried them in the empty spaces of sentences we could never manage to say, but understood meant love. How can we not tell the living from the dying? Even in this stark and pitiful moment of repose, I know before me lies a new, impossible labor.
This is called Golden Shovel after James Hearst's Dead Crows. I'm going to read the line from this. Nothing was resurrected, and the crows returned to the grove. Only people stare each morning into the mirror at their own dying faces. The starlings swoop in their murmuration. Nothing matters more than the ants gathering crumbs. I, who I've become, this rain, this resurrected womb, this lightning bug caught in a child's net. And the sing-song chants they chant the dusk into. The culling of joy from the seams of grief. And the crows who gather at my driveway steps, I've given them what they've returned to claim, their dance of 2 by 2 as I break the bread to gather with their shiny beaks, and oh, how they share the bread, not fight like pigeons or gulls, and fly off to their grove. Their murder fills the trees with the rustle only of their oil-dark wings, innumerable as these people I carry in my chest, living and dead. I stare at the curtained windows of suburban homes. Each is a story of many lives I cannot claim to know. In the morning, my retired neighbor in his black socks and shorts walks into his driveway, stretches, gathers the pile of postcards and bills from the mailbox, waves when he sees me. I do not know if this is a mirror for my life. I do not know his name or the names of his dead. At night, he leaves an upstairs light on, as if waiting for someone to arrive. Their footsteps up his staircase could be my own as I make my careful way up to bed. My wife dying slowly. I see over and over in the mirror the nameless angels' faces.
Sean read that this morning on the radio, and now I have to follow him. Wow. So I have a condition called vasovagal syncope. It means I pass out, and if I'm in a medical situation, so I've passed out maybe 50 times in my life. It's weird, and I don't recommend it. I discovered when I was in the hospital once, and I had a heart monitor on, that when I passed out, that my heart stops when I pass out. This is not an unusual thing. But nurses seem to think, and doctors seem to think it's a big deal. So there's a mention here of me, of my heart stopping, which was literally true. This is after James Hearst's poem, Balance Sheet. It's on page 34. I'll read the passage from James Hearst. From my father's family, I inherit this long face and a need for facts. On my mother's side, a delight in tales where the hero slays the dragon. As a kid, I used to pluck a day at random from the calendar and convince myself it would be my time to go. Or maybe my mother's or my father's. Sometimes I'd assign one day to the whole family. House fire, flash flood, car crash. It was a morbid game, I admit. But I was only preparing myself to inherit what was already rightfully mine to hold in this world. The fact of it, too heavy. Its shadow, too long. Tomorrow is a blur of endless omens. The face of the moon tilts its blue gaze onto me at last and speaks the truth. I've been right all along. There will come a day, sooner than I would like, but later than I'll need, as I float on the current of cool abstraction. For now, another day and night, another set of facts, a buoy in the ocean. What else to rely on? Here's something. 4 years ago on Christmas, my heart stopped in the same hospital where my wife's mother's heart stopped for good. I have been to the other side, and I've come back to report. Nothing. Not even a glimmer. no tunnel, no light. In this I take no delight. Believe me when I say I'd love something to believe in, if not God, give me ghosts, aliens, Bigfoot, fairy tales. Who knows for certain what or how or when or where? I was only gone for 12 seconds, but I do know the room emptied and expanded to contain me. No hero, just the simple passing of a simple man who slays himself with each living moment. I do know the reason for grief. Its shape like the fire of a dragon.
You know, it's funny to hear you talk about that when you died for that last moment, because I hate to admit this, but like I've had a lot of health problems over the years, and one of my favorite feelings is when I go into surgery and I disappear for a little while, and I wake up and I was like, wow, I became like nothing. Like I have no memory of that. And I used to think, why is that comforting? Isn't that supposed to be upsetting to people? Like, why is that comforting to me? And I realized because like the idea of the afterlife is like a real responsibility. And I think I used to think, well, you know, when I was a little kid, you know, if I go to heaven, like, does that mean I have to be good all the time? And so that idea that, you know, just sort of like things stop and there's no pain or anything, it's just everything goes black, was actually very relieving to me. This is called Golden Shovel after James Hearst's A Jog to Memory. And I'm just going to read the poem. 1, 2. You wrote, the odor of wild honey, and I've never smelled that fragrance. Most of my nights do not expect perfume, lavender, petunias, honey, not here where I argued with a client to take a shower. Expect anything, my supervisor once said. Happiness will find its way. I have the water running. Every morning is not the same. His room is cold, a cold day. In April, the cruelest month, this man is in his pajamas, not wanting to undress. And in the end, what can I say? In his head is something he is holding on to and will not release. This is a form of freedom, I think. And he doesn't stink like so much of this world that reeks of dying. The dead rabbit, skunk, skink, duck, doe, the ark of the dead I pass on my drive in the dark. Then at sunrise, the ill open their eyes is all we can ask of these diseased winds. But that was years ago. Today, I am wondering about arias. We stroll the meadow with our daughters. The clover and forsythia are full of bees, the sunlight, the color of wild honey. What labor in this life is worthwhile, not to earn nor loaf we breed, and even if there is pain, as I watch their mother, we are holding on to the warm, like that man. And what I'm trying to tell you is more than a mere jog or a memory. The absences we make as we walk forward, or simply cry, like the bald eagle we watch rise, and then it dives. We dive too, down into the dark that wraps itself around us and make with stories we have told. My daughter is now running to catch some flying thing. My wife says out loud, as if not to ourselves, is this what we have been given, or was it earned? Must we ever care? The long shifts, the hospitals, the pain, be what it may, there is a choreography to it all. And this is what I heard when it called and calmed. It said to me, somehow, to let the pain recede. Open both your hands. The Reb says, among us, there are those so holy they remain unnamed, but by their presence, our lives are kept close to God. We go to work, we accept the pain, this daily act of saying no. The man said no. Let it go, like the sea. These are our chores.
So these poems, I wrote all of these poems in Mexico City. I spent 10 days there last summer, and this last poem that I'm going to read that's based on James Hearst, I have one more poem after that, so does Sean. The last poem after one of these James Hearst poem is explicitly mentions Mexico City. And there's a strange confluence of things. A good friend, a poet whose work I admire and who I published many times in the North American Review, Martha Solano Marty, she died of ALS not too long before I wrote this poem. And I was thinking about her and how she suffered and how my mother suffered. She had a condition called myasthenia gravis, which is neurological, but it's an autoimmune disease that has some symptoms that are similar to ALS. And then I also had just visited Frida Kahlo's Casa Azul in Mexico City and saw, and I already knew, but saw her prosthetic leg and was reminded of all the suffering that Frida Kahlo had experienced. So this is me in Mexico City thinking about my mother, thinking about my poet friend who died, and thinking about Frida Kahlo. This is after James Hearst, Each to Its Own Purpose. I'll read the passage from Hearst. They said, don't use words like epistemology in a poem. Use short, fat, beetle-browed, Anglo-Saxon words with big butts, and shoulders that clutch, hump, sweat, sleep, that plant, grow, reap, store, shake, fear, starve, haunt, die. In Mexico City, I see the faces of the dead in shop windows. They smile at me in Espanol. Yesterday in the rain, a young woman said, "Que llueva," laughed and squeezed under her lover's umbrella. I don't think the rain will ever stop completely. Every morning I try to use my broken Spanish to order un café. My tongue stiffens and the words turn to mud in my mouth. In June, when the sun comes out, it's like a visit from a friend who leaves again too soon. I read epistemology over breakfast, poetry at noon. An old poet friend of mine died in May of ALS, her body shutting down like my mother's did. In a story, I could tell you more about their lives, but this is only a poem. One day I'll become someone's dead poet friend, and they can use me in their poem, quote some lines, lament a life cut tragically short. Years ago, I published Martha's Ode to Frida Kahlo's Eyebrows, a fat, sprawling song of praise for the Mexican painter, the beetle-browed mystic mestiza. Her most prominent feature is framed in Anglo-Saxon phrases: fleecy fluke, downy leech, seaward sooty gull. Words celebrating a brow most buxom that finds itself hobnobbing with Salvador Dali's mustache. What Martha has left behind is too big to fit on this page. Like Frida, too free, too bountiful. Here, grief butts up against a far greater sadness. Even the sidewalks complain. Thick, uneven slabs cracking, giving way to the roots of trees, shoulders jutting angles, sleek angles from the earth, water pools in clavicles that accept the holy offering of rain, and concrete crumbles like a clutch of brittle bone. For 2 years, my mother slumped in a chair, the hump on her back bulging, all 33 vertebrae fractured. A cold sweat wet her brow. unable to lie down, to swallow, to speak, to sleep. One could hardly concoct a torture more inhumane than that. Frida suffered too. A broken spine and shattered leg would plant the seeds of revolution in her heart. I don't know how beauty can grow from such pain, but when it does, it is a brutal harvest to reap. In Mexico City, I see the faces of the dead smiling at me in every storefront window. I ask through the glass if they're still in pain. They shake their heads and laugh. Of course not. There's nothing left to fear. No darkness, no danger, no strife. We can neither suffer nor starve. Now, like old friends, come to visit. We've just stopped by to haunt your dreams. Todos los días, todas las noches, until the day you die.
I remember when Jeremy first sent me that poem, and I was just floored because it's so complicated. First of all, the way you take the James Hearst where it's like beetle problem, what the hell are you supposed to do with that, right? And then the three narratives, and I was friends with Martha Solano too, and so you have this elegy for your mother, this elegy for Martha Solano, and this elegy for Frida, and then you weave those together in such a way that those three lives of these three women are remembered in such a beautiful, tender way. Like, it's just, I don't know.
It takes right. Thanks.
I'm going to read a small poem. I approached the project in two ways. I took longer poems. There's one in here which gets to be about 3 pages, but I'm not going to read that. And then these little ones, which are more sort of like, the lyric impulse. And this is one's called Golden Shovel after Hearst's elegy. And his lines go, "Listen, my friend, shuttered in your small room, winter is gone." And there's something really holy about just that small little lyric that he did there. And so I speak back to him. I did not address the tree. "Listen," I said to the wind. "Where are my grandmother's ashes?" I let them loose, friend. I watched them scatter. Her life was not shuttered. She loved the light, so I keep her in an urn. Now the tree says, "Your grandmother is this bird song. Consider her frame, so small she could have fit into the tiniest room, like the one that lives in the silence of winter, when all is still, and the just fallen snow is shining like blue glass, and sorrow is gone."
Okay, I'll read one last poem, and just to let you know that the collection ends, or our collections, each individual collections, ends with a poem written toward each other's work.
Yeah.
So I chose a poem of Sean's, and Sean chose a poem of mine, and we wrote Dueling Shovels toward that, and that kind of sort of intertwines the collection. And the poem I chose was not hard to choose because in some ways the poem has transcended even Sean. It is one of the most famous poems. If you want to look up Why Bother on the internet. Why Bother poem, and you can find it not just in English, but translated into how many languages? Many languages. You just found one in Arabic, right? Yeah. So this is a poem, I think it's an important poem, and I'll read it. Why bother? Because right now, there is someone out there with a wound in the exact shape of your words. When I wrote this poem in Mexico City, I'd also, in my hotel room, watched this movie called Afterlife from the 1990s, I think. And the premise is that when you die, you go to, you meet with like a group of counselors. It's a very strange movie, but these counselors are tasked with talking you through your life and you deciding on a memory, or the people deciding on a memory that they want to keep with them for eternity.
See, that's pressure.
Yes, it is. You got 1 week to decide, and then the counselors make a little movie of your memory, and they reenact it for them. And so I watched this movie. It's really it's a very charming, interesting movie, Afterlife. So that's the sort of like what was inspiring this, in addition to Sean's poem. I want to make a movie that captures every moment of my life, because there are so many things I can't remember. If the actors get it right, then I will have created a full-size recreation of the past, here and now. In fact, now that I think about it, there isn't much difference, is there? I mean, when you take a picture, you have the picture, but the thing is still there too, right? It's kind of like magic, like when you meet someone new. The world is so alive, you feel like a new person too. You go out for a while, fall in love, break up, a whole sad, beautiful story, but there are infinite versions of you now. The old you, the new you, the you with all the memories, even the you hardly remember and refashion into a hero or victim or bystander or whatever it takes to tend to whatever wound that needs to be healed. If I wanted, I could make myself more handsome in the movie. And I could go fast forward all the painful moments. But maybe the point is to go slow-mo or pause those parts. I guess I don't have an exact plan mapped out quite yet, but I'll keep working on it. It's still taking shape. Making anything is hard, but a movie like that, geez, had to be the work of a lifetime. Just imagine the number of extras, not to mention your clothes and books and stuff. I can't capture it all, not in so many words.
That's like such a perfect realistic collection. It's a nice job there. Oh my God. So I did mine after Jeremy's poem called Kitchen, this book. So I'm going to read the lines that I took from that poem. Her stories at the end were all the same. One hospital after another, oxygen tank and tubes. Years ago, I know she wanted to die, maybe even try. My instinct to hide away from the world was her terrible gift to me. These are just such profound lines. And they spoke to me in so many ways. My wife has been dealing with long-term illness for a long, long time. And then for my job, I work as a medical technician and a caregiver for people. Right now, I work with people with traumatic brain injuries. And so one of the things, when I took these lines and throughout this collection, I touch upon my caregiving experience. And one of the things that happens is that the people I take care of, they tell me stories. And some of them just have these amazing, amazing stories. So this tries to work that idea into the poem. Golden Shovel after J.D. Schraffenberger's Kitchen. 2, 3. Billie Holiday sang as I drove to work, her voice dark as marrow, love gone wrong, stories told over double shots, or pianos at 3 a.m., smoke in the glint of keys, the ivory handles of 45s, even the rain precise as the end of the beginning sentence of a story where once repeats itself twice. All were present. I was driving to work, the radio loud with jazz, and the rain was the same late November weather, stormy weather. One Ella loved to sing those last years in the hospital. The nurses say she was still humming after the beeping stopped, as if her voice was another voice that did not need oxygen to speak. Like the tank I hook up for Anthony. Old 80s Italian man who loves Ella and Billie Holiday, 80 years old, tells me again as I check his tubes he saw Billie when he was 17. Years before you were even born, son. Years ago, I smoked gauloises, snuck into all the clubs, and I played cornet in the school band. You know, once I could read a score. I knew a song. We heard she was playing a gig in Hell's Kitchen, and we wanted to hear her set. Word on the wire said she wasn't to live long. By then, her voice was ash and needles. To die singing the blues, her liver sieved, and maybe that is better than this. Who am I to even question Lady Day's life? I never even tried to name such sorrow. You, son, my, hand me my hearing aids. I played by instinct, but I was too young and tied to what was said to play what could not be repeated, hide or hid beneath the notes. There was a way, oh yes, we saw her, walked from 52nd Street. It was spring rain, cherry blossoms, the wet asphalt shining as spilled gas. What this world knows is pain. In that packed room, what was spoken was speech made of a minor chorded hush. Her voice opened me. And after, I felt terrible despair. You see, my veins, which was my gift, and my regret, like Lady Day, too young to know better. But I got clean, and this is me.
Well, I'm totally drained, and I was just sitting here listening. So you two have something left. Anyone has any questions you'd like to ask both or either of them?
First of all, can I give both of you a hug? And then second, how do you find the words to describe everything that you guys are feeling? Is there a way, like, what book do you guys have that you open up to see an emotion? How to describe the emotions? Like, how did you get to that point?
That's the big mystical question.
It's a big mystical question. You want to take a stab at it?
All right, so I want to answer this real, right? I don't want to just give some, like, performative, professorial,
Plus, you don't want to give away your secrets.
I think to get to be able to articulate, it's not about the feelings, like what you said, the feelings. It's about finding in language what sings that sounds maybe what our feelings are. And so I think that comes from just, working for years in language. And then you learn certain sounds mimic the body's emotional responses. So you learn this word ohs, and this word ahs, and this one sighs. And then by listening to that over time, you can articulate experience with that language. I think that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and I would say the end of the poem, the last poem I read, it's admitting that art is never going to quite capture the ineffable, but I can't put it in so many words. The beauty, though, is when you try, you create a thing that becomes another thing. Like, that's the point of the last poem. So you create a work of art that now exists outside of you, and it's related to the origin of your feeling, but then it becomes yours, right? So the writing this is always seeking that word that will actually capture the feeling, but you're never going to get it. You're just going to approximate it. And so it's like what will suffice, as Stephen's would have said, not to be professorial, damn it, you got me, Sean. Yeah, so it's a great question. It's one that I don't ever get asked that question. Where do your words come from?
No.
But you have a relationship to certain words,
Yeah.
and certain sounds. So I mean,
Right. I love O's and B's.
O's.
B's, I love B's.
second ode sorrow.
Yeah, second O, so right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the letter O. Because it feels like what I walk into a lot, you know? Mm-hmm.
I have a very professorial theory about the O, but I'll.
But hold on, one more thing. But, there's certain cultures that have different takes on this. So, like the Spanish, they talk about the duende, that it comes like this. You can evoke it and call it into you. And I kind of like that, these dark sounds that you pull in it. They enter your body and these angels with razor-bladed wings, I mean, you can't beat that, It's good.
I have a question about form. I wondered if either, so question for both of you, I wondered if either of you have tried the reverse golden shovel, so that instead of your lines feeding into the model words are starting your lines.
So it's sort of acrostic in a way.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
I've never done that. I like form. I like almost arbitrary form. I've never tried that, but I will say that this was super challenging because it challenges when it's on the right-hand side as opposed to the left, it challenges my notion of what a good line break is. Because now oh my gosh, it was like, you end with an A, it was like, I would never do that. I would never do it. It was really, so the challenge was really pleasurable to try to wrestle with it almost as a puzzle that you're trying to figure out while also trying to be honest. We'll talk about the form.
Yeah, I've written those before. I have a poem in an old book of That Ship Belonging to Lorca, which is a sestina, but then an acrostic on this side. And it says, my son Gabriel Joseph Dougherty is a theosophic being. And it was 2 letters too long, so at the end there's just an NG hanging there. Like a quiz to go back and look and to see. But I found that easier to do for some reason. I think because what Jeremy says, when you get to that end line, it kind of messes with our poetic psyche, Like, whoa, I'm ending on an A.
The craft is yes.
Do you feel like your poems come from a reaction to a feeling, or like the feeling? Like, does it help you process it, or does it help you finish? It doesn't make any sense. Like starting the process of healing, or like ending the process.
My poems do not come from feelings. I can tell you that, and I don't think they have for a long time. They probably did when I was starting. When I was a wee lad. But they come from something in language that I see. They used to come more from like Philip Levine says, like poems of witness. You're walking on the street and you see something, or but not even that. They usually come from I overhear something, or there's some sort of idea of language that's happening, or a sentence or a phrase that really catches me, and the way those sounds are pushed together, and then that kind of leads, and that out of that creates story or narrative if there's some. But it's really not like how I'm feeling anymore. Because I'm old and jaded. It's about the universe, I'm just waiting to die. No, but I think it's that because I'm looking, it's probably because I'm not hyper-conscious aware of my feelings, but I'm hyper-conscious aware of language that, is a container for what I'm feeling that I probably don't even have a name for.
If this is helpful, I wrote these poems dry-eyed, but I read them and I can hardly keep from breaking.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a difference in the thing itself, which then you're part of it, and then I'm actually experiencing what the poem has been crafted to give someone, not just me. And so it does come from some feelings, but the poem itself, it's very much, I'm working on it as a craft. And maybe the craft part is a way to keep your feelings at bay, in a way, to hold it at arm's length. And that could be therapeutic too, to be able to handle something as an object rather than re-experiencing it. So maybe the origin versus the completing, if that gives you some insight at least to how I operate.
Yeah, I mean, there was a point where I realized that when I was working my best was when I was not emotional. And suddenly I realized that that's my medical work. We're trained in what's called rational detachment. You know, I take care of people, you know, in situations which are heartbreaking. You know, people die that I've taken care of for a long, long time. What do I have to do? I got to go down the next day and get somebody up to get up for the day. You know, there's no grieving process in that. You internalize it. And there's also nothing about me. You know, I take care of people with behaviors and violent tendencies, you know, and, you know, my middle name is Motherfucker, so, you know, 'cause they're just, you know, that doesn't matter. You know, the goal is how can we make their day better? And so by doing that, you learn to care without emotion. And I think that idea of rational attachment, at least for me, really helps me. And I think it helps you to approach the page. That the page isn't about what you're feeling, it's about what is language doing and what's the question here in language to articulate something which is perhaps bigger than me, myself, my I, and my story. And has more to do with an imaginary reader out there who will read this thing and then will make connections somehow between the page and the words and the language. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you guys might talk a little bit about inhabiting space. Like, it seemed to me that, I mean, I really love your noir poem, the one with Lady Day and, you know, something about rainwaters on asphalt that spilled gasoline, which is a great line. But it felt to me like you invested not in feeling, but in the ambience, the mood of film noir. And Dennis Johnson country, you know, thinking Jesus' Son and that collection. And then for Jeremy, I really love your poem with the one that Sean Thomas already praised about the three women and how you sort of inhabit this place, this Mexico City and Apollo, and bring that to life. So I wonder if you might just say a few words about that. Because like for actors, like I really like what you're saying. You can't play feelings. We were just talking about the fact here that we all act in community theater. So. But you know, you have to play an action and objective. You don't go into it like I'm going to play the press, right? And but I do think as actors we inhabit the space we enter into. And that's what I feel very strongly about your poems.
Yeah, Juliana, you were great in the apiary.
Yeah.
I'll say a few things. I think that to capture ambiance, you need some very specific details. And for me, with Mexico City, you know, it's hard not to stereotype a place. Like, what is it known for? Like Day of the Dead, and I was literally seeing Day of the Dead masks in all the storefront windows, which is how I started that poem, not quite knowing where I was going to end up. But it was the sidewalks that in Mexico City, in the part of town I was in, which were all cracked, and many of them were just like dramatically, you know, in jagged edges. So when I wrote, the sidewalks were complaining, their thick, uneven slabs, cracking, giving way to the roots of trees, shoulders, jutting the sleek angles from the earth. And it literally would rain all the time, and water would pool in them like these clavicles. So capturing that specificity was important for me to get Mexico City rather than, I did go see Lucha Libre when I was there too, so you know, you could have played on some of the, like, hey, we're in Mexico City, what is it known for? But instead it's like the small little detail that these most of the sidewalks in Mexico City where I was were terrible. But I found them interesting for that reason.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think, at least for this project, I mean, I'm not going to talk about poetry in general, just for this project, place I found was really important to Hearst. And I think that's when the farmer poet is. But it's not that, it's about the dirt, it's about the you know, the birds, the specificity of the birds. He talks about the small town, you know, that kind of specificity. So when I read that, it made me look like super hyper closely at what was around me. So there's things in here, like there's a graveyard I walk in, there's my neighborhood, there's Route 5, which I drive to work, there's the work experience and the specificity of that. And so to really try to capture the really concrete detail of that, I think. And I also think that's because, at least for me, because the form is using somebody else's words, so then, well, what's super hyper specific to the environment that I live in that I can add to this to conversate with Hearst, you know? And then also to speak with you, because there's an audience question here. Like when I was writing these, Jim and Jeremy and James Hearst were kind of a micro audience. I'm writing these poems to the three of them at one point.
Three J's.
The three J's.
Maybe one last question.
Jim had a question.
I have one. I don't know if I can articulate this, but when you guys were talking about that removal from the emotion so that you could write about the emotion, it kind of, I think that's sort of what you said. And it made me think of Jim Carrey when he said that he got very upset at one point in his life, and he was crying and like really having some strong feelings. And he's like, gosh, I wonder what this looks like so that I can use it as in films in the future. So he went to observe what this looked like in a mirror, and that removal of having to look at it made it go away. And how when we can write a poem, like you said, you wrote it dry-eyed, but now they are harder for you to speak through and to experience. I feel like when you can take something that is so strong inside of you and put it in a poem, that you have created this thing that's outside of you now that you can't experience, and it almost is a relief to have it out of you in a way that it's now a thing, and you have given honor to it by creating the thing, but also now you can really observe it from this removed space where you can let it really be felt. I don't know if any of that made sense.
Amen.
Yeah, and I think what you're getting at something too is that since it's removed from you, it's out. So why does it open? What happens when you read it? And that's what I think happens. If you write these poems, you dry, then you go to read it. It's a great quote from poet Marjorie Waldron, who says, "The voice opens the body." And so suddenly these words, which are really outside, your writing's outside your physicality, right? But when you go to speak them, those words are entering your body and opening your body. And so then that's why it's hard, yeah? That's why it's so hard to, articulate, to say that.
Plus you're distracting your brain with the form.
Right.
A little bit.
That's how you can get it out.
Yeah.
Hey, well, thank you both. Great night.